This is a presentation about what has the Chinese government done for COVID-19. And the material is based on a press conference on 6th March 2020. These are the presenters. The first presenter is Mr. Ding Xiangyang. Mr. Ding is a member of the Central Steering Group and the Deputy Secretary General of the State Council. In his presentation, he mentioned these things. I'm presenting this in two languages, bilingual. This is the English version. The Chinese version can be found in my Chinese channel. From on that date, 3rd of March 2020, the World Health Organization already believes that China has adopted the bravest, most flexible, and most active prevention and control measures in history, which of course has changed the course of the spread of the pandemic, saving hundreds of thousands of cases nationally. This success in China would have provided the international communities sufficient time and experience for fighting this pandemic. Unfortunately, many Western countries haven't made good use of this time, and for example, United States is now have over 6 million cases. This is very tragic. In accordance with the requirement from Premier Li Keqiang and their other members, the Vice Premier Xun Zhenliang lead a central steering group. Now, this central steering group, actually, Mrs. Xuan is actually in Wuhan throughout the pandemic. She have lead the group with firm confidence and based on helping each other and using scientific method to prevent and control, and then applying the policies on a very precise ways. Now, how that can be done will have to be looked at in more details. So we are going to look at it. First of all, she organized several expert meetings to conduct research, clarify the principles of the so-called four centralizations, and using different management techniques for different group, classified management, that means dividing the patients into different categories and apply different management techniques. One of the most important things is actually the integration of traditional Chinese medicine with the Western medicine. And what she called move the border forward, meaning that you plan ahead, don't fight the pandemic when it had already happened. Try to look into the future, prevent what will becomes the case, and then by moving that border forward, that means you are providing more resources and eliminating the later difficulties. Early intervention, and including for intervention even for the mild patients. Use multidisciplinary expert groups and keep on strengthening the treatment mechanisms. By the time this conference is held, they have already issued 7 different editions of how to treat different categories of patients. The treatments must be timely, based as much as possible on the diagnosis and the treatment standards. So here, as I mentioned, they had already by that time launched 7th edition of the diagnosis and treatment plan. And in particular, they are divided into different treatment plans for the light and less severe case management, as well as for the severe and critical management. So there are different management methods for different patient classes. In order to actually help the patients, it's important to provide them with sufficient psychological support and help and care. Meeting the needs of the patients will make the fight much easier. So they strictly adopted the method of preventing the spread of these epidemics, especially with those patient groups or population groups in great danger. Here it includes prisons, nursing homes, welfare home, children's welfare homes, and etc. Now we know that, for example, in Victoria here, our nursing homes is one of the places where a lot of cases are found, and many of our casualties actually comes from the aged care. So that is one thing the Chinese have done pretty well. They have prevented all this, and really important is they try to create epidemic-free bubbles. So when, for example, if this high-rise building is free from the virus, then try as much as possible to keep it that way. That will eliminate the number of patients as well as protect the people there. So they are pretty strict in terms of enforcing the social distancing. This is something very different from what we see here in the Western country or in Australia here. One of the most important is you have to have a command system which coordinate from top to bottom. When you have a policy, that policy must be executed in all levels. That is very important in order to mobilize sufficient resources in order to help the patients. The second is you need the citizens to cooperate. In order to secure their cooperation, the process must be open and transparent, and disclose of all the prevention informations in a timely manner, so that the people there will be able to accept this intervention, and then at the same time act as a monitoring of the system. So there is a lot of accusations saying that the Chinese is not transparent, is opaque. This is absolute bullshit. In order to mobilize the people, in order to get the cooperation of the people, it is important to be open and transparent. And that is exactly what the Chinese have done. And that's why it is so successful. The third is scientific prevention and control. Science is the best method to handle natural crisis. Any natural phenomena can be investigated using scientific methodology. The Chinese strongly support the use of scientific prevention and control mechanism. The last point is to make sure that all the prevention mechanism, the treatment mechanism, the resources, etc., are all provided and is provided for use. If you don't have the resources, you can't do anything. So the another important thing is you provide the resources necessary. Finally, the fifth point is that it is a whole people mobilization. It is a people's war. Treat it as a war and mobilize everybody to fight the war together. And that is one of the key reasons why China is so successful. Another reason is that China has a large population, 1.4 billion people. So if that virus is spread to other parts of China, the consequence is huge. Therefore, it is important to limit the virus only to Hubei, to the province, and basically to the city, Wuhan. So by limiting the virus into a small area, then it is possible to stop it spreading to other parts of the country. At the same time, it is also realized that the city itself will not have the resources to fight this epidemic on its own. No country in the world can do that. No city in the world can do that. That is exactly the same for Wuhan, and that's why we will talk about how they provided all the resources necessary. Up to March, 6th of March, Hubei has already consumed or has been provided with 5 million PPE, personal protective equipment. And at the beginning of the epidemic, Wuhan, the Hubei province, can produce about 1,000 to 2,000 this PPE per day. Obviously, this is not enough. So, by organizing other parts of the country to provide to Hubei, then the problem is a little bit better. Okay, and up to that time, already they have distributed more than 9 million N95 masks. So this is some kind of resource demand that no single city is able to provide. At the peak of the epidemic in Wuhan, another big problem is patients is increasing so fast. 3,000 patients every day. That means we need 3,000 patient beds every day. There's no city in the world which have 3,000 beds in hospital waiting for patients to come. And that is not only one day. You have consecutive days of 3,000, 3,000, 3,000 increasing. That means there's no city in the world able to have, say, 10,000, 20,000 beds waiting for patients to occur when there's an epidemic. No, you can't do that. And therefore, you need to quickly increase the capability of the hospitals, increase the number of beds. Up to the time of the press conference, there have already been 49,000 confirmed cases just in Hubei, and therefore they need to renovate 86 designated hospitals, build 16 shelter hospitals, and eventually provided 60,000 beds to meet the needs of patients. Providing 60,000 beds also implies that you will need a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors, a lot of space, and so forth. So we all know that Wuhan built 2 specialized hospitals. One for Shenzhen, another one is Shenzhen. 2 hospitals, basically, the first one in 10 days, the other one in 15 days. So these 2 hospitals provide an addition of the first one, 1,000 beds, the second one, 1,600 beds. Still, it is a large difference. So other hospitals which have no facilities to handle infectious disease is now renovated to meet the needs. So that's one way. But for those patients with mild symptoms, or for those patients who have been tested positive while with no symptoms, they are all isolated in these so-called shelter hospitals. Obviously, in these shelter hospitals, the amount of nursing requirement is much less than, for example, in intensive care units. So by building these shelter hospitals, they can cater for a large number of mild case patients. In terms of scale, a typical so-called tertiary hospital, the large-scale hospital, has about 1,000 beds. These are considered large hospitals. Providing additional 60,000 such beds means they are building 60 hospitals on that scale in 1 month. So this is, you can just imagine the amount of work that's required and the determination of the central government to actually make it happen. It is almost an impossible task. The second idea is that you have to treat it as a war. In a war, when the enemy is bombing the cities, people go into underground shelters. When you treat this epidemic as a war, then people need to seek shelter in order to prevent casualties. That is social distancing. People will suffer some kind of inconvenience, discomfort, but that is necessary to reduce casualties. Again, we see that, for example, in last weekend in Melbourne here, we have protests against social distancing. Now, that means our people isn't convinced that this is a war. This is something we need to fight together, and therefore they are coming out protesting, and that is very selfish and irresponsible. The next part of the presentation is by Mr. Wang, a member of the Central Steering Group, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. So why Industry and Information Technology is involved? Obviously, to provide the material support. So ensuring the material needs of Hubei is met is their priority. So there are several parts. The first part is medical protective equipment. So initially it was in severe shortage and eventually becomes sufficient. The second part is all the essential medicines that is available. Now they are stocked to 10 days in the hospital and is supported by government standard provisions rather than different hospitals trying to procure on their own. Having a centralized control system means the material will be used more efficiently. The third part is provide a wide range of different kinds of medical equipment to treat different cases. Now we have an example here. Because this is from industry, so the information from here is more accurate than the one before. Take the protective clothing as an example. The national output at the beginning is 20,000, and we know that in Hubei is about 1,000. In order to provide more than 5 million of this thing, within 40 days, let's say 50 days, 50 by 20 is still can't meet the need. So they have to gear up. So the production capability increases from 20,000 per day to 500,000 per day. In terms of the mask, increase from 20,000 to 1.6 million per day. And for the ordinary surgical mask, it's now reaching 10 million per day. Now that is the increase of a factor of 20 or 25. This is a huge work. Now, so far, at that time, they have allocated 5.3 million protective suits, 10 million N95 masks, and 38 different types of medical equipment. And the number of that is 65,000 sets, including some very difficult to make expensive equipment such as 22,000 sets of respiratory therapy equipment, 67 of which is those expensive advanced membrane oxygenators. And for ECG monitors, 50,000. This is a huge amount of resources made available in a very short period of time. At the same time, they have provided almost 700 negative pressure ambulances. How to do that? Well, by increasing productivity. Another important part in this effort is the role the Chinese medicine play. Here we have Mrs. Yu, who is a member of the Central Steering Committee, member of the party group of the Health Committee, as well as the secretary of the party group of the Chinese medicine. So she is obviously from a Chinese medicine background. At the very beginning, when this epidemic first appeared in China, there's no experience, there's no treatment plan, there's no vaccines. People just don't know what to do. It's a completely new kind of disease, a new kind of virus. So they draw onto the background, the experience of Chinese medicine. In this particular case, the Chinese medicine have played a very important role, and the effect has also demonstrated that the Chinese medicine is actually very effective. Of course, Chinese medicine has its own unique theories and practices, and this has accumulated over thousands of years of experience in China. When there's no specific medicines and vaccines for this new disease, they draw on the experience in the past. Chinese have been dealing with plagues all along, so using the formula from this experience, they are helping the people. Now, in fact, Chinese medicine has also been used to fight SARS, to fight influenza A, etc. And again, this time the Chinese medicine have been shown to be very effective. And as the patients get discharged, then we can see that this combination of traditional and Western medicine is effective. So far at that time in March, there is already 50,000 patients discharged, and many of them use Chinese medicine. Typically, Western medicine is much more expensive compared with Chinese medicine. So for the bulk of the patients, they are treated using traditional Chinese medicine. Only those who are severe, then they will use a joint method, using both the Chinese medicine and the Western medicine. But for most of the mild and symptomless cases, they use the Chinese medicine. The Chinese medicine is not used alone in some cases, but for many cases, the Chinese medicine was used alone. So Chinese medicine have been quite useful. Now, I do have some data about all this number of percentage people cured using Chinese medicine and so forth. Unfortunately, I cannot verify that these data are correct, and therefore I'm not including all this data into this presentation. If I can verify the numbers to be correct, then I probably will do another video or so to let people know. At the moment, during March, when this information was made available. There are several studies, but the scale is very small, typically 50 to 100 people as a group. So we have these small studies showing that Chinese medicine actually works. But how about Chinese medicine working in a much broader sense? We need a lot of data to accumulate to achieve that. So far, I haven't been able to find that information being published in a peer-reviewed journals. Therefore, I'm not including them here. For the rest of these smaller case studies of 50, 100 cases, it was included in the press conference itself. But unfortunately, I cannot find the original journal articles, and therefore I am not including it here. But they are already in March, there has already at least 3 well-controlled studies showing that Chinese medicine actually works. The Chinese medicine is quite different from the Western medicine in a sense that Chinese medicine is more concentrated on preventing a disease rather than treating disease. So it is focused on enhancing the body's own resistance and repair mechanisms and maintain overall balance in terms of the body functions. So using that technique actually has shown to be useful, especially when there's no Western medicine to attack the virus. The most important part of that one is we have a very large percentage of people who are tested positive by the test. And for these people, some of them do not have any symptoms, but they were all collected together to put into those shelter hospitals. And in the hospital, they are all treated with Chinese medicine. So this is the earliest time possible when you identify patients, whether they have symptoms or not, they are given Chinese medicine. Now, to the Chinese medicine is very natural, so nobody is rejecting this Chinese medicine anyway. And then when for the more severe and the critical patients, they have joint consultations between the Chinese and the Western experts, and they use a dual approach. The Chinese medicine helping to boost up the immunity system, and the Western medicines to make sure that the body functions are actually working, and that has shown to be very successful. During the recovery period, acupuncture, massage, and other Chinese medicine methods are being used to make the patients feel better and faster to recovery. So thank you very much for listening. This is the presentation which coming from the early March about how the Chinese handle this virus.